Thanks for joining us today for Lunch and Learn on Facebook Live. My name is Gretchen Boyum. I'm the Director of Exhibitions and Programs here at the Salina Art Center. And today we are excited to have Jane Anderson, the Director of the Friends of the River here in Salina, joining us to talk a little bit about the Smokehill River here in Salina. Just a couple of things before we get started. We are opening our new exhibition today, The Spaces Between, which features artists Tim Stone, Robert Bupp, and Lynn Benson. And today's discussion really grows out of looking at Lynn Benson's work, particularly her research of various rivers and waterways around the world. One of Lynn's main concerns is drawing attention to various rivers and asking the viewer to develop a deeper appreciation of, these natural resources that we have, these precious resources, and how we as a population interact with these resources. In Salina, we've been involved in a discussion for years about the Smokehill River in particular, and which is featured in Lynn's work, so you can come and find that in the exhibition. And talking about what can we do with this precious resource that we have in our own community. So today we welcome Jane, and she will be talking about the Smokehill River project and asking the question, why save a river? I would invite you all to submit questions in the comments and Facebook. And Jane would also like us to reflect on the question, what will the river bring to you? And feel free to leave those thoughts and reflections in the comments as well, and we will pass those along. And with that, I will hand it over to Jane. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I feel honored to be at the Art Center, so it's really good. And the show, by the way, is beautiful. So make sure you make your way down to the Art Center to see the beautiful artwork. I would like to show you something that's going to be a little bit unusual, not exactly talking about the Smokehill River in the first part of this, because I want to share this little clip from it's an advertisement for the San Antonio Riverway. And so if you're patient, I want you to see this, and I'll see if I can share my screen. Oh, there it is. Share. Okay.
The river, where it sprang from the depths of its rolling hills. Paths of history, the dreams of dreamers, the heart of patriots, and the minds of innovators. And this river brought many to its banks. It brought many artists, storytellers, award-winning chefs, poets and writers, and welcoming hosts. The river brought guardians of history, beautiful families, and special friends. And the river brought many things. Across time and place, across generations and cultures. It brought new flavors to its tables and richness from its earth. It built legacies. It brought a champion closer to his greatest game. closer to its world, and a parent closer to his child. What will the river bring you? Visit San Antonio and be moved. Deep, deep in the heart.
Can you hear me? I think this is a beautiful video about creating a place. And I brought that as an example of what can happen to any river. This river has been tapped and used in such a beautiful way. And I looked up and how many visitors they had in 2018 to San Antonio. They had 39 million. Obviously, we're not trying to be San Antonio, but I think the little history of that river is actually not as different as you would think. Whoops, sorry, hold on. Sorry, let me get rid of this. Sorry, dude. Did I lose you? Okay, there we go. Anyway, the thing that's really interesting about San Antonio River that most people don't know is by 1890, it was a declining river. It was a spring-fed river, and they had taken a lot of the water for agriculture and everything, and it was drying up. And it was by 1911, they actually had a group of citizens that were concerned enough, and they were trying to protect it. So it went through a lot of different ideas on how it could be used for the community. And what's interesting is what drove change there was they had major floods there like they did on the Smokehill River. And at one time, they even talked about covering that riverway with concrete and getting rid of it because of the flooding. And it wasn't until about, they also talked about straightening it and removing all the vegetation. So it was the citizens actually that saved that river, because each time there was ideas like that, there was a group of citizens that rose up to protect that riverway. And it wasn't until 1926 when they built a dam and they had figured out how to not have the city flood constantly that real renewal could happen there. And it was actually the WPA in the 30s that actually did a lot of the original work on that riverway. We also have WPA walls on the Smokehill River, and if you go into the parks, the old rock seating areas were built by the WPA. So it is interesting what's happened to that riverway that could have been gone, and how it's made that city a destination place. And so I would like to share a little bit of this story with you about the Smokehill River and what happened to it. And I'm going to try to share my screen again, just a minute. There it is, share. The Smokehill Renewal was an idea that actually started a long time ago, and it really has been decades of thinking about it. And so we're going to talk about what it was and why did people come here in the first place. This is your Riverway. That's actually the Ghost River now. There's almost 7 miles of river that runs throughout Salina, and a ferry used to cross the bridge to connect the people. It was located where the Iron Avenue Bridge is. That's where the first building was built. It was the source of water. It was the source for milling. It was basically everything to this community. There would have not have been a community without this riverway, and there still wouldn't be one. 60% of our drinking water comes out of the Smokehill River now, and most people don't even realize that they're actually completely dependent on this riverway. This is one of the original mills that came, and this is an old, I think it was a postcard of the Western Star Mill. There were two mills, one out by the softball fields, and this one, I believe, was located, the one that's by the community theater. And the old dam that's still standing was part of that original deal. This is a photo of, this was a boat, a rental place, and this, we believe this was located where the Salina Journal building was. And so when I talked to old timers of the community, this was a source of pleasure and fun. And one of the stories, this was a building that must have been torn down. There was a building that then was built right on the waterway, and Mr. Exline told me they used to throw rocks on the roof and drive the owner crazy. So they were naughty boys. So that was something they had fun with. This is one of the old Iron Avenue bridges. That was the style of the time. And you can see this was the river had a lot of water in it. If you go look at it right now, it's completely dry, and we can talk about why that is. And this is another photo of boating on the Riverway. It was such a place of pleasure, and also a place of fishing. That was it was an alive ecosystem, and it still is on the east side of the community. And I heard one lady told me that during the 1930s that they actually depended on this for catfish. They were poor, and they depended on it for their meat. And so you can see that this was taken in 1913, and women are wearing their long dresses, which is so amazing to see now. This is the dam over by the community theater. You can see there's really running water, and they were fishing off this, and you can see the power and the magnificence of the riverway, that it wasn't just a little trickle, that it really was a real riverway that had a lot of water in it. This is so interesting to me, and I'm not sure if this is global warming or what, but I don't ever remember the river freezing over enough to ice skate on it, but this was apparently something they really did. I've heard a lot of people talking about they build bonfires on the side and have a lot of fun. So apparently it froze up quite a bit, and they could ice skate on it. It was big enough, this is what is amazing, and deep enough that they took these little power boats on it that could hold about 20 to 30 people, and it was sightseeing, etc. This is, I believe, another Iron Avenue bridge that came later. Obviously, it was kind of beautiful, and you can see that that it was built to last. Another view of the river when it was really full. This is looking off the Avenue Bridge. And the problem that happens with the Riverway, just like San Antonio, that they had major flooding, and the same was for the Smokehill River. One thing that was really interesting when I read about San Antonio, people moved out of the region of the waterway, and a lot of the neighborhoods were called Hill, Dale, or blah, blah, blah. And I realized our thing are that way too. The hill, it's hillside, highland, everything to get away from flooding. And so Salina had about 3 to 4 major floods, and this is showing one of the floodings. I think this is just a great photo of people still having a good time, apparently, even though they had to wade to the bar. So this is also interesting. What I found interesting about these old photos, that they were posing in the flooding, and they seemed not that unhappy, although I know flooding is incredible, devastating. And this one, to me, is the most bizarre one of the whole thing. They're all wading out in their clothes and having a fun photo taken of the flooding. I live in one of the oldest houses in Salina. It was built in 1875. And there's stories of it having, it's on Iron Avenue, 4 feet of water, and they could boat through the house. So you can see why people are upset about the flooding of the Riverway, and that it created a lot of instability. Well, because of that instability of flooding, the big one that really made everyone change their mind was 1951. And after that, the Corps became involved with the waterway. And that's why you have a riverway on the east side of the community. And you can always tell what is man-made and what is not in the plains. If you see a straight riverway, that is actually a man-made river. And so you can go to the east side and see this kind of ribbon of, they blew it out of the hillside. But it has caused a lot of erosion issues because the water runs through there too fast. So the Great Plains, you're really supposed to have a meandering river that has a lot of curves in it. And that slows down the riverway and also allows the birds and animal life to, like the ducks, be able to have their babies on it. So there's reasons that we know about curving. Anyway, they blew out the east side of the river. I've heard it from all different older people. Some people said they didn't mean for it to dry up the riverway going through town. And others said, I've heard that they actually just didn't want to spend the money. It just seemed really expensive. And the practical Midwesterners thought, well, we'll just blow that out and let that be the river and we're done. But what I have heard from every old timer is that it was the biggest mistake Salina did, is to not spend the money to make sure the river still ran through the middle of town. And so what happened then when you have water not going through as fast as it should is the biggest problem we have here is silting, because we've uncovered the Great Plains for the agriculture. And so with silting, when the water slows down, then the dirt will come and sift down to the riverbed. And so what happened then, it couldn't even hardly run water at all in certain places. So not only do you have a riverway that's been forgotten, but it also was filled with dirt, which makes it harder to put back, obviously. And the reason, this is a lovely photo I'm showing you, but it is a true photo of what's on the Smokehill River. And people go, where's the trash come from? And there's a lot of misunderstanding of where is trash and is it blowing in? But what happens is, in every riverway in the world, it is also manages stormwater. So people have a naive understanding of, they think it's going through our sewer system and being clean before it dumps into the riverway. But no sewer system could handle that amount of water. So what happens is your waterway is dumping into your river from all over the place. And on the Smokehill River, the old channel, there's almost 78 storm drains. And so what it does is, when people throw a cup even 5 miles away from the river, when it rains, it's going to pick it up and float it, and it comes right down those storm drains and then right directly into the riverbed, which then flows into other rivers and it basically flows down into the ocean eventually. That's the story of what's happening in all waterways across the world. And so we're really trying to push that forward, because I think most people, once they see this, they would make the correction to not just throw the trash out the window. And so you can see it's what we're finding mostly is a lot of water bottles, which I think is really ironic, and a lot of fast food cups and et cetera. But we do find, we found a couple shopping carts and a bike that'd probably been stolen too, but there's other things. But mostly this is the kind of trash that you're going to find in our waterways, and it's a problem everywhere. So who are the Friends? A lot of times people think I'm actually working for the city of Salina, and I am not. The Friends of the River Foundation is actually a charity, a 501c3. It was founded in 2009 by 6 people. And I think that's important to actually say it was 6 people, because you think it would take hundreds and thousands of people to get a river to come back to life again, but actually it was 6 people. And that's what I always try to tell students, is that you have more power than you think you do. And what I find amazing is that they are the ones that actually finally got the ball rolling, because when I talked about the Corps shifting the river to the east side, that was done in the early 1960s. And then it dried up. It took it about 20 years from listening to people for it to really be hardly a riverway anymore. By the 1980s, it was really devastated. But it was in the 1970s, they'd already decided they'd made a mistake, and they hired the Wilson Company to try to do a master plan to see if they could actually run the riverway again. So this has been going on for like 50 years. What I find interesting is every decade, it looked like it became in front of the city commission, don't you think this is important? And then it would be shelved again. So I find it really interesting that these 6 people were the ones that finally got the ball rolling and really decided that it was worth taking on as a project. And how they did that was actually cooperation. And I think that's an important word right now, especially in this time period. If they had not visited with the city's line, if they not cooperated with the city commissioners, none of this would have been able to happen, because the city has to be involved. The Corps of Engineers has to be involved. And a waterway is it is a very important thing. So it is still a Corps of Engineers has control of this riverway, because it's still part of the flood control part of the plan. And so you just don't get to do whatever you want. I've had people go, can't we just go down and dig? And I said, oh, you could, but you know, the Corps is going to shut you down as soon as they find out. So a waterway isn't that simple. And so because of their willingness to work together with others, they developed a good relationship with the city of Salina, and that's still going on. And they actually raised, I think it was around $400,000, and they did a campaign, and they hired a group out of Denver. And the first part, what they did is to see, does the community care? Do they care if there's a river here or not? And of course, if they didn't care, the city's line is not going to take a leap into spending money on a project that no one cares about anymore. One thing I remember hearing is Brad Stewie told me this story. When they first started working on the Riverway, no one would call it by its name. They just call it, oh, you mean that the old sewer drain down there, the old pit? And so he and the others made sure that they always called it the Smokehill River. And then the city put up some signs, the old Smokehill River channel. I think that's an interesting take on what happens to a place that even it won't be called by its name. It's so degraded. And calling by its name was actually really important to give people that it could be more than what it had become. So the Friends formed, and they found out people were interested. And when they found that out, then the city agreed to do a master plan. And what I've learned about master planning is something I hadn't really thought about in great detail before. The master plan it did 2 things. It found out, can it be put back again, which they found out that's yes. And it also gave a big view or plan. And a riverway, if you don't have a plan, you could be in trouble really quick. And so what it did was give everybody a place and a vision for what could be. And what I realized, that's just as important as the contractor going out to dig. You have to have the vision first, because you have to have something that will help people believe it can happen. So I hate to say, by 2010, they had that finalized, and they tried to put it in front of the voters for a small tax increase. And, you know, there are several reasons probably why it failed. Maybe it was not the right time with the country in poor economic shape. Maybe no one was quite ready. You know, there's no one real. There was a great no campaign on that running with it, but it did fail. And what I find the most interesting part about this riverway is that this group of people did not give up. And so they laid low a little while, and then they came back, and they actually fundraised, and they did an economic analysis, try to prove that if you did something like this, it could actually help your community. And so what happened then, they knew it could go up for a vote one more time. And so I was hired in 2015, and we knew it was coming quick. And we by 2016, it was in another campaign for a sales tax increase. But this time, we called it Yes for a Better Salina. It was super simple wording. We did a grassroots ground swell. We had about 100 people maybe in total that helped us, and 50 that really helped us. Probably it was more like 50. Some people were the social media people. Some people went around and put signs out. Some people went door to door, and some people were the speakers and the front people. And what I found interesting is people working together, even in small groups like that, they can accomplish something magnificent. It was all ages working on it, which I was delighted to see. It was probably one of the most exciting and frightening things I've ever experienced as a worker, because we all knew this was our last moment. And if it failed, I personally thought it would be finished. And so it did pass for a small increase. And the package was a multi-package, and I think that did help it pass. It also included streets and parks and trails, capital improvements, as well as the renewal of the Smokehill River. The vote did pass by 6,282 yes to 5,416 no. It was a difference of 866 votes. Some people thought that was really close and we barely made it. And then others thought, wow, that you really had I remember Jason Gage, the city manager, was surprised at how much we won by. So I thought, well, I guess it's wherever you're standing. Some people thought it was really close and others thought it was a really good win. But whatever, it was a win, and we were absolutely thrilled with that. And then what comes next with that? And so this has been an interesting journey since then, because obviously that was 4 years ago. And so people are like, what the heck is going on here? So I'm going to give you a short little story of what happens to bring about a huge project like this, if you're willing to listen. One of the things that happens first in something like this, the City of Salina, it's basically a City of Salina project. The Friends, we're advocates for this Riverway, and that's always going to be our role, as well as fundraisers for projects that the city cannot fund. So what happened next is they hired a company that would oversee the river renewal, and that company was called HDR. And then the other really important part that happened is they formed a steering committee made of community members of all ages and from all over the place. And there was 26 of them that came in there. What is interesting is how well we actually got along and could collaborate together. And I think that's another part of the story of working together and being able to not have to fight over winning made a big difference on, as they called it, updating the master plan. The master plan had been done by 2009. And then by the time this came around, the downtown was going through its beautiful revitalization planning. And so the master plan needed to be updated and to reflect some of that of what's coming next. So the steering committee was in part of that all along, and all along with that, just so you know that this is truly a community plan, there were surveys on any kind of things that came out of this. And so it's been surveyed and surveyed. And the other part that's really exciting is the Corps of Engineers has become heavily involved in this, not in a bad way, in a good way. And the Corps, what they bring alongside of this is a plan to, they call it restoring a project that they actually didn't mean to hurt an environmental area when they diverted the Riverway. And so this project that they're working on, if we get it, will be to help the Riverway become a living ecosystem again, because the city, we could never have enough money to do that. So we're hoping for an addition $10 million from the Corps, and which would be lovely. And when do we find out about that? Luckily, it's coming quicker than we think. In December, they're actually submitting their plan for what they would do on the Riverway, and it goes to Portland. And we're hoping, cross your fingers, by February, we will know if we get the additional 10 million, which will go along with your sales tax dollars. So the good news is they work together, both Corps of Engineers and HDR in the city. So they're not doing, they're both focusing on different parts of the Riverway. So what the Corps would do, they would, if we get it, would be the group that would oversee the dredging of the river, which would make it become a living ecosystem again. So the city dollars would be more for infrastructure projects like bridges and things like I'm going to show you right now. This is a plan, as you can see that building across the way. We're looking off the new Iron Avenue Bridge. And this is rendering of the car museum. I mean, it was just a little drawing. They loved it so much, they asked if they could use it, which we agreed to. But what you can see right on this part of the downtown area is it's called, it's hardscaping. It's the only time there'd be a boardwalk next to the river, which we're hoping will go all the way into Oakdale Park. This is the only time the trail's divided. The trail would divide here so that the bikes are on the other side. So in your most busy area, it would be a safety deal. And what you can't really see is there'll be a new plaza here for gathering and places to be along this riverway. And we feel like this is really important. This is one of the big changes to the original master plan. We found that this part of the downtown area is where we wanted to spend most of the money, honestly. The good news is they're also going to do an homage to the Art Deco on this bridge to tie it all together. So it doesn't look like it doesn't fit in with what's already been done downtown. This is looking off Iron Avenue Bridge, the other direction toward the community theater area. And what this is you can see there's the trail here. And that's a bridge that's going over. It's just a walking bridge, but it's bringing the two trails into one there. And what you're looking at is something that everyone's super excited about. Whenever we did surveying what people want, the trails were always number one. Well, actually, number one was a running riverway again, which we thought was very sweet, that people realized they just really want a river again. But trails was always that. And so we feel and have heard that and know that whatever we do, that has to be part of this. And then the other thing was boating. That was also very high in the deal. And this comes to this area, as I showed you earlier, that old picture of the Mill Dam. The dam is actually ready to it's ready to collapse. And they said, do you want to spend money on a historical thing? Or do you want it to be a boating area? And this is what I found interesting, even with the older people. They wanted it to be a place for boating. And so the dam is going to disappear. But instead of that, there'll be 4 or 5, they're called little mini waterfalls, basically, with canoe chutes so that you can shoot, and it will be a really fun area, which will go all around the community theater, clear to the end of that street. It's also close to the downtown, so you can hear running water, which, of course, is a beautiful sound. So we think this could be one of the most really exciting part of the Riverway. This is also a rendering for over by the Midway, I know I'm going to call it the Bicentennial, the Tony's Event Center. What you don't think of when you live in a place for very long is like, you know how to get around town, but others don't. And Ohio Street is our busiest street in town. And so we know Oakdale Park and the Tony's Event Center and the fair area is a huge place for car shows, the River Festival, tons of shows at the festival, the animal shows. And so it's actually a way to welcome your visitors into your community. So this is just showing, this is actually a fountain in the Riverway. This is part of the trail system, and another water feature as sort of a welcoming, it would be a trailhead. So this is one of the ideas for the Riverway. This is trying to show you what it could look like in other places of the Riverway. This is actually a bridge, and this is a story about why a master plan is so important. This bridge came about before the river even was passed, and it's over by True Value and the fairgrounds. And I wasn't hired yet, but I heard this story that the Friends really made an effort to not put in a culvert bridge, which means a pipe bridge, or you can't. It's obviously you couldn't do a boat under a pipe bridge. So this became, because there was a master plan that had been adopted by the city of Salina, it became a guide to them to know what to do next. And so it would have been way cheaper to put in a little culvert bridge or not a bridge at all. But because of that, we have this lovely bridge that's there. And as you can see, there's actually a place underneath there for an art place. And if you go down there right now, it's not a place where anyone's going to hang out in this moment, but it was designed for the future. And that's why I started learning, like, oh my goodness, this would have had to been taken out and started over if they put in a different kind of bridge. So I was very grateful that they had taken enough time and effort to fight for this bridge. And so they used this then in the design thing to show what the trail system could look like. The one thing that I've always insisted on as a steering committee, which I was really proud of them, is to try to have as least mowing as possible. You can see on the left side, it's a little, it's more like, native grasses, and letting it be a little shaggy and letting it be more natural instead of mowed. And so what you have to realize is probably 75% of the Riverway is actually going to be quite wild. And so, which makes me happy because I love that part. But we wanted to show people that it's meant to be a little shaggy and wild because it's supposed to be a green area. So what are the Friends doing right now? COVID has changed things as it has for everyone, but I want to give you a little history about what we're doing. This is a little project we were working with an artist in residence with Salina. This was several years ago, and these are little middle school kids. I got so excited, and they got to cut down some invasive species, and they got to do this weaving that hung over there by the but it was teaching them about natural objects, trying to teach them about nature. And one little boy goes, "A science class was like this every day, I am in." And I'll never forget the impact of that. I just told him, "Hey, we got to clean up the next day. Why don't you guys come over?" And we had some little boys riding up on their bikes to come help us. And what I realized is it was giving them a door in to experience nature and to have a little bit deeper understanding of their own geography. And I feel that's really important for the Friends to help people understand their place, and actually not only understand it, but understand that it's worthy to be loved. So that's what a purpose of the Friends is. And so I'll show you, this is Saline County Water Day. These are Salina South High student theater students. They created a bunch of improvs about the waterways and what happens for some, I think they were fourth graders, and boy, they had their attention. And what was so fascinating with good storytelling is when I tried to ask if they got any of the ideas about it, the kids had them all because it was fun. And so this was a great experience for me too, to watch these kids just go crazy with these little improvs. So this is another project we've been working on. We're developing puppet stories to go out. This has been in collaboration with a lot of fundraising. Dane Hansen, thank you. Greater Salina Community Foundation, Robin Kelly X-Line. There's been a lot of donors. I may be missing people that have helped. Oh, the Smokehill River Festival. We've had a lot of donors to let this happen. And there's been 3, Bella Beaver, Bartholomew Bullfrog, and the Great Blue Heron. These are all animals that are found along the riverways and in the Great Plains. We wanted things that are appropriate for here. And they have developed stories that teach science, and we've gone out in Arts Infusion when we could meet in public. The 2 stories we have created will be filmed, that will go out in Arts Infusion as a film now. And we did get a grant, and we do have some, if you're curious about some of them, up on YouTube. So we created some social media pieces. I'm finding filming is way more difficult and hard than I would have thought. And it was fun, but it is what it is. This is going to be performed professionally, which we're really grateful for. And this is Ann Hookster with 2 of the puppets. And there's the Great Blue Heron. He actually walks like a heron. It's a beautiful puppet. If you ever get to see it, it's amazing. This is another project of trying to help students get really excited about science and also nature. We had a grant from the Pat Mullen grant for the Greater Salina Community Foundation to work with, we did work this year. It's not going to happen because of COVID, but Sacred Heart middle school students, and they went with a college professor and tested water and got to run the tests. It was hands-on. And then we also bought materials for science students at Kansas Wesleyan, and they did their own science studies along the Riverway. This has been a really interesting project. and it actually has helped a couple students get into their graduate schools. So we're very excited about that. We always want to encourage students to go in the sciences and to love nature, so that we feel like this is very appropriate. This is some other photos from them. This was such fun to watch these students get excited about what they were getting to learn about. The other thing that we've been working on is cleanups along the Riverway. As you can see from that one picture, there's lots of things to do. This is a fun group. I've been working with Fall Fix Up and Spring Spruce Up for ever since I've started, and it's a great collaboration with other charities. And then we also host groups, like we've had zoo leadership, we've had church groups, we've had trying to remember who all we've had, KWU college classes. We've had before COVID. We did have Fall Fix Up, and it went really well, this keeping our distance. So we were very excited about being able to have a cleanup again. What I've learned about cleanups as a person in this field is I thought we were cleaning up trash on the river, and along the way I discovered it was a great way to introduce people, let nature tell its story about what's happening, and let it teach them and let them be the new spokespeople. I'm a one-person shop. We need others to become spokespeople for the Riverway. So this has allowed, I've learned it's actually probably one of our best education outreaches that we could ever do, because it's very meaningful to people. They feel like they've really helped thing, which they have. And for example, in just a morning, we pulled out about 32 bags of trash out of the Riverway by the Y. They have a huge storm drain there, and they don't have anyone to help them. Someone told me, "Why are you doing that? It'll just come trash again." I said, "Well, do you want 10 feet of trash, or should we try to at least keep it clean along that trailway?" I think this was a fall or spring spruce up group. And so this is showing the beautiful volunteers of Salina. It's been a great experience for me personally to see how many people really do want to make a difference in their community. And we're just allowing them to have that opportunity to engage. And we most certainly need all the hands we can get. So that's some of the stuff we've been doing on that. This is some other photos of, I think this is that little boy that rode up on his bike. I'm almost sure of it. These are some KWU students. This was a church group. I don't know how much, am I out of time? I have a great church story. This church is such a lovely group. And what I found, a lot of churches think that they need to help people directly. And so they're kind of a little nervous about doing a nature project. I don't know why there's a disconnect, but somehow there is sometimes. Anyway, I'm the only one that would take this many people. And so he came over anyway with his group. And they had such a great experience. They did it for a few years. And one church mom got so excited about it, was so distressed by the trash she found. She has become a lovely spokesperson for the Smokehill River. I've heard she'll even stop people if she sees them throwing trash. And she's spreading the word about what's happening to our riverway. So from a group that was a little bit resistive at first, we won them over, and nature did its job and told its story. So this to me was a great experience. This is just in the Oakdale Park. You can see it has some water in it. People do ask me, why is it dry? And I can tell you why. The reason is they don't usually turn water in from the east side of the town unless it's for the Smokehill River Festival or the car show. And the reason is it's so silted in when it first turns in, it's really hard for them to get water to come down. In fact, I think it takes almost 2 days or so to get to the Oakdale Park, which is a shame. Now, because of the storm drains, they're not all bad. They've actually desilted the river and part of it. So it's right in there. There's not any storm drains. So it makes it the worst it is. So when is this river going to happen? Well, the bad news is we did have to come to a standstill during COVID and, really worried about the project and everything. And the good news is the project is back in the schedule. The only really thing that we lost, we did have to turn in one grant that we had received for building part of a trail because the city did not have the money to finish the other part during the COVID part, when they were worried they would not have enough money to do that. And so that was probably the worst thing that's happened. And the other part is it actually delayed to finish all the designs. And so our schedule for when it goes right into construction is delayed a year. So I know that sounds like forever, but after what we've been through, I think it's worth waiting a year. So instead of 2021, it should go into construction in sometime early 2022. And we hope it will have water by 2024. And if the Corps comes alongside, they'll be mixing in there sometime in construction. The Corps could be working on it for quite a few years, and that's just how that works. So, but we're hoping with city dollars, we'll have a water moving through the river by 2024. I'm very excited for that. So that's what I got, lady. Is there?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jane. It's great to hear about like all of these different things that are happening. And I loved listening to the history and seeing how this space was used prior to the flooding and stuff like that. So I thought that was really cool to see all of those images. I have a question for you. And if just a reminder for people who are watching on Facebook, or please, submit your questions or comments in the comment section, and we will pass them to Jane. But I know one of the things that I really find exciting about this project is how it combines all of these things, like you were talking about science, arts and culture, history, and we were talking a little bit earlier today about what brings value and how do we measure that value. And one of the things kind of more specifically, we were talking about like economic versus aesthetic value. And I thought maybe you could talk a little bit more about how, all the different kinds of ways I think that the community sees value within this space.
I think it depends on who you are, but there is actually a monetary value, and we're not the first river to be redeveloped. And what I've heard is that you can take what is being spent on it times 10, and that's what will happen around it. Let's just say we're spending maybe around 35 million times 10. You may have a $350 million economic impact of what will stir around it. Now, will that happen? Of course, nobody knows that for sure, but from what it looks like happens in other communities, it could well happen here. And I think Denver, these are huge cities, and we are not Denver, but their river was completely environmentally dead river, and the land around it was not worth much. And it has gone in the 40 years they've been working on that Riverway through Denver, from the land of industrial use and not worth much to the highest. It's the highest ranked property right now. So that's what happened to it. And I'm hoping that it will help with redevelopment along the Riverway. The river will allow lots of different ways of looking at what do you consider a boost for your city. Of course, economic redevelopment is obviously has to be way up there. But what it also does is help create a better image for our community. The one thing that I think the Midwest is not good at, we're good at a lot of things, but we're not really good about bragging about ourselves or being proud of place. And I think this Riverway will give you something to talk about in a positive way. You can be really proud of a beautiful Riverway. And so it brings back the identity of our little town into, it's not really that little of a town, but into that it's a river city. And that's a place that everybody wants to be around. So I think it's going to do a lot for helping recruit young people to want to live to Salina. The one thing I've experienced as an older person is when I talk to young people, I have never experienced in all my years working in colleges a project that creates more excitement with young people than this one. And that has even surprised me because I'm excited about it and I thought they would be, but it is absolutely true. This is a project that they will get excited about. The trails excite them, the water, getting in it, all of those things. So I think it will really help our recruiting of young people to want to live here for working. I'm hoping it helps recruit businesses to want to be here also because of quality of life. It's definitely a quality of life project. The trails, connecting with the trails on the dike, we'll have almost 30 miles of trails when this is completed. That's a big deal. And if we can really boat in it, it creates something else to do. And so, especially during this time of COVID, it's really made me think about nature has been the one place that we could all feel safe in. And so I think this project is more important than ever. Not that I'm hoping COVID is gone with a vaccine, but what it did is a reminder that nature can provide so much for all of us, and that this project is truly a community thing that anyone gets to enjoy. And that to me makes it the best part of it. So
thank you. Couple more questions coming in. First one, how much money has already been collected through the sales tax initiative?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I don't think I do not have the answer for that one. That would be a question for Utilities Director Martha Tasker. I don't have the numbers on that. And so what has been promised is what they paid for the swimming park, what do you call that thing? Kenwood Cove, which was about 1.35 million a year for 20 years. So that's what is promised to the river from the city of Salina. As far as what they've collected so far, I honestly do not have those numbers, and I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. I think,
okay.
But it's a good lead into our next question. Do you see the city eventually assuming responsibility for the outreach and fundraising efforts currently undertaken by the Friends of the River? This model would become similar to that for the field house or new tennis courts where there are long-term public-private partnerships.
No, I don't see the city fundraising. That's, well, I could be surprised. Maybe, I don't know. At this point, I would say they will not be fundraising, but that, what they do, like Martha Tasker is truly the project manager, our utilities director. She's managing the project, and she's managing the dollars that they've been given. And also, if the Friends finds other dollars that will go, we will be part of that also with fundraising. But I actually see the Friends of the River actually being the fundraisers for this project, as far as any extra money beyond the core and the city's line of tax dollars. So it will be the Friends of the River. Did that answer that question?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I have another question for you, kind of building off of the question of what will the river bring to you. I know a couple years ago with the 7th grade culture crawl, you had done this really exciting project, basically asking that question to 7th graders, and there was some really wonderful answers. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Oh, like what answers they came up with?
Yeah, like about the project and some of the things that they did.
That was super fun. I worked with Brian from Lakewood, and we partnered. He talked about more the biology of it, and I talked about the project. And then we asked them, because I realized there's very few times that we've really asked 7th graders, what are you thinking? And so we laid out some paper on the floor and huge newspaper rolls and asked them to draw or write, what do you want to see on the Riverway? And I have to tell you, it was really fun and surprising. Like, we got everything from, I don't know, what kind of restaurants they want along the way, to what they want to do along the Riverway, to boating, to fish. I mean, what I realize is that they have an opinion too, and that I need to remember, we all need to remember that they are part of the piece of the river, and make sure that we have things that are fun for middle school kids as well as high school, that they're remembered. And so that has changed me in thinking about the Riverway, and that they were so excited to put it down. It didn't take them long to start coming up with their own ideas, and their drawings weren't they fun, Gretchen? It was fun, actually. So anyway, we had a good time with them.
Oh, those were great. It was really, I loved seeing some of those images, and just
what they're
Just
thinking.
yeah, just
Yeah,
fun and
yeah.
exciting. So
They were definitely willing to step in and have an opinion, and that I wasn't sure. We kind of took a chance on that because we weren't sure the first time we did it if they would come along with us. But man, they got excited. They were in it. We had teachers coming up looking at the maps, and it just comes back to what I'm talking about. It's such a project that is for absolutely everyone, even middle school kids. They actually like it too. And that's hard to find something that a middle school kid's going to get excited about, or high school. So
yeah,
I found working with high school kids, those theater kids, they got all excited about it. And their teacher told me later that even months later, when they're crossing the bridges, they'd get conversation with the students talking about the Riverway. And so it's just a really exciting project that's going to impact all of us in a way that I'm not sure we even understand the extent of the impact. So
right. Yeah, I think that's great that the younger generation is really behind this and excited about it, and something for them to use as well. So, um, I have one more question, kind of more, I think, focused on like water quality. I think you had addressed that briefly, like at the very beginning, where you're talking about like, this is also part of this is used for drinking water within the city. One of the things when talking with artist Lynn Benson that her and I had talked a lot about were these ideas of water rights, and particularly with rivers, just based on the nature of rivers. There are so many varied uses, throughout the whole length of the waterway. And I was just wondering if you could tell us maybe a little bit about, who do we share this river with, and what are some of the things that happen, with this space outside of our community?
well, this river starts in eastern Colorado, and as you know, there's lots of problems in western Kansas with water usage, and sometimes it's even dry because they've taken so much water out of the underground water thing. So, water is going to be one of our biggest problems in this state forever, as well as really, it's fresh water is going to be a problem everywhere. But I think at one time we tapped into the most amazing resources here and thought it would never end. And so agriculture just bled out water. The Smoky Hill does have rights on it for irrigation. And that's a complicated topic that I'm not really an expert in. And so, yes, people do have rights to use it, as well as the city of Salina has rights to water. Now, the Canopolis is overseen by the Corps of Engineers, so you see their hand in our water is huge. And so, what's been very interesting about the city, and I think there was a huge drought. I think it was 2006, where the river actually was dry here. They had pulled in all of it, and the pulling in for our drinking water actually comes out by the softball fields. And so after that, it was totally dry. I could walk on it. It was one of the creepiest things I've ever witnessed. And what was interesting then after that, the city has been developing more wells, but they also bought, Martha Tasker calls it like buying a cup, that it's a holding cup in Canopolis. Like, you buy that water, so when it's really dry, you've got your cup of water still. And so we're going to be purchasing a recreation cup if all goes well. It's a one-time thing that you pay in Canopolis, because that was one of the questions: what happens, will the river be able to run water? And so you have rights to run so much water through the Smokehill River now. They did some early permitting to see what could be done with that. And so what will happen then, in a really super dry year, you've got your cup of water in Canopolis. I know this is simplifying it, but that they can release for recreation, which meaning we're talking about the old channel, Smokehill River, to keep it running with some water in it. Does that make sense? So that the other thing that's really interesting about these projects, they've come so far in being able to manage it. when it first turns back into the city, they're going to have this thing. It's a weir, and it will go up and down with the levels of the river. So they're only pulling the top of the river, which means that's the cleanest water. Remember, we talked about silt was the big problem in our waterways. So it pulls the cleanest water in. And it also means that they can control how much water comes in or not comes in. We have permitted so much water that gets to go through the old channel. So in the summer and the fall, spring, when people want to be on it, they'll run more water. In the winter, they'll actually take it down and run it less because there'll be less, less use. And so they'll have more, but it'll still come out to about the same amount. And then they'll also run it through a water, oh, Jiminy. They'll have some water pits. I'm saying this wrong now. That actually will let the water take out some more silt, and then it'll run it through. I'm calling these all by their own names. A water marsh they'll create that will actually become a great place for bird watching, and that will actually filter out phosphorus and stuff from agricultural. Now, the one thing I can tell you, Eric Dove, he's the HDR project manager for this Smokehill River. They've been testing water and did all this thing. And he told me he has been so happily surprised with how clean the water was in Smokehill River. So that is a surprise. Now we're sharing Smokehill River with Lindsborg, that's their water source, and other communities along the way. So this river is used, recycled, and taken out. Like our sewer jumps in to it. And actually Martha told me they're dumping water cleaner than they're taking in. So it's come a long way, because I remember before the sewer upgrade a long time ago, I can't remember when that in the 90s or something, it was burning fish for a couple of miles. It had so much ammonia. Fish were being burnt by the ammonia. So when you can say that the water's cleaner than it coming in, we've come a long way in water quality. So it's used by cities for drinking and a lot for agricultural. So we're sharing it with lots, but with the water rights and being able to tap that cup and purchase it, it does protect the recreational use of the Smokehill River. So that's what we're hoping that will happen. That's a long answer, sorry.
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, it's interesting I think
Yeah.
we don't always think about all of these other people
Oh.
or organizations or cities that use this, we share it with so many other people.
Oh yeah, it's running for over 230 miles, and it eventually connects with all the rivers into the Kansas River. And so we are neighbors and friends with everyone along that chain. We are all interconnected with water. One thing I remember talking to this guy that owns some pasture land with the creek, and he goes, "Hey, that water's mine." And I said, "Is it?" I didn't know that it was just staying in your pasture. I said, the thing about water is always moving, and so we're always sharing it. So it's a shared resource. And the way the one up above you treats it, if they don't dump it in super dirty, it's cleaner for the neighbor down the way, because it's a shared resource by all of us. So it's very precious, actually.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we have any more questions, and but I thought that was really great. I loved, again, hearing about the history of it, and really look forward to this project continuing. So thank you so much, Jane, for joining us today. And
yeah, thanks for having me. And the friends were really happy to be at the Art Center. So hey, come check out the show. It's really lovely. So
the exhibition is open now. The spaces between were open to the public Wednesday through Sunday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Yeah, come in. You can learn a little bit more about rivers and water all over the country. And just a couple more notes for our Lunch and Learns, which will be on Facebook Live now, I believe, for the rest of the year. But join us again on November 18th when Robert Bupp, one of the other artists from the exhibition, will be visiting with us. And then again on December 16th, artist Rachel Bowler will be here as well to talk more about her project. But all right, that's it.
thanks.
Thank you, Jane.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.